So as Alex introduced, I'm Adam Gamble. I'm a senior systems engineer, delivery consultant, or whatever you want to call me, with a Citrix Gold partner called Sigma Solutions. You may know you have a fellow, some of you CTPs have a fellow CTP, Eli. He works with me at Sigma. Been a Citrix guy for about 10 years. Been in IT for about 10 years. Always had Citrix in the environments that I've worked in. Worked in a few different verticals, healthcare, finance. Then I got some crazy idea that I wanted to be a consultant, and here we are. CCE, CCEV, and a bunch of other acronyms. I don't really put much credit to. You either know your stuff or you don't. You can follow me on Twitter, Adam in the Cloud. I've got a little blog. You can email me hate mail at that email address. I am trying to get big on Twitter, and I really follow probably most of you guys in the room, and the ones that follow me, I appreciate that. You can tweet about this session if you want to. Adam Session Rocks, okay? So appreciate that. Or if it goes badly, Adam Session Sucks. So we'll see how it goes at the end. I'll check that hashtag. So we are going to be talking about XenMobile today. Pretty much the talk is going to be focused on the Enterprise Edition, but I wanted to give just a quick, brief overview of the 3 editions so we're all level set in case anybody's not sure. 3 editions. First one, MDM, mobile device management. Second one, app. Third one, enterprise. Real simple. MDM lends itself more to, company-owned equipment. App, manage the data. In enterprise, you get the whole thing plus share a file. So that's the overview. I also wanted to share kind of the deployment times that we're seeing in the field, and that I'm hearing from my colleagues that have deployed in the field, and kind of what the averages are. If some of you guys are starting to get mobility practice going, or starting to get XenMobile going, and wanting to put scopes together and deploy this thing in the field, this is kind of the ballpark that we're throwing at clients. First one, MDM. So we're scoping that at about 2 weeks. That includes HA. So 2 MDM servers. We are assuming that Netscaler is already in place in that deployment time. Single site, nothing fancy. These are just estimates, so take with care. App Edition, pretty much the same thing. 2 weeks, includes HA, 2 app controllers, high availability, single site. We also assume the Netscaler's there and works well, and environment's pretty clean. And then for Enterprise Edition, we usually scope that at about 5 weeks, 4 to 5 weeks, depending on what the customer requirements are. Again, that includes HA, and that would be the whole stack, including share file, with HA throughout. Again, single site, Netscaler on, and working well. So we expect those times maybe to get a little bit better, but based on my experience on the field and people I know that have deployed it, that's probably the sweet spot right now at a minimum, especially if you get any crazy customer requirements. So let's talk about a little bit about tips on kind of putting it together, and share not only some great resources that I found, but hopefully advice that'll help anybody that's looking to do XenMobile deployments. First off, don't rely on eDocs. If you haven't heard that before, you've heard it now. Don't rely on CTX articles either. I'm going to give you an example of why later on in the presentation. Or I really shouldn't say don't rely on, but proceed with caution. Do rely on your community contacts. Do rely on trusted blogs. I know a lot of the time when I'm actually running into problems with this product, I'm looking at blogs from trusted blogs that I follow. I'm in Jarian on IM, and other guys I know, my colleagues. And that really is probably the strongest knowledge base out there right now for XenMobile, unfortunately, and the most consistent. And then this is kind of silly, but it's true. If it doesn't work, and Jarian can attest to this, I know, if it doesn't work, try silly stuff with it, like unchecking boxes and rechecking them and saving the config and all that kind of stuff. Anything that you would think maybe wouldn't work for XenMobile right now, try it. It might actually fix it, unfortunately. Yeah, re-import the app controller, stuff like that. Stuff you normally would think wouldn't be an issue. It actually could fix the problem in a lot of instances. Some planning tips. I got a whole list here. These are questions that you want to have top of mind when you're talking with your clients about a XenMobile deployment or mobility deployment with XenMobile. Single data center. I'm going to talk about why later on. Do they have a PKI infrastructure in place? That's a big one. Any crazy policy expectations? What do they expect to get out of this product? What are they trying to accomplish? What are they trying to do as far as MDM management, as far as MAM management, application and data control? What are the expectations? Because that could increase your SAL and scope time quite a bit if they've got a lot of crazy policy expectations. Do we want to integrate ShareFile with Active Directory? If you do, Andy Morgan actually has a great blog out there. It's probably like 50 pages, but on doing ADFS with ShareFile, it's not fun, so you got to kind of figure that out because that could add a few days at least. They have Netscalers already, and that's a big one because a lot of SMBs you talk to, that's one of their first questions is, do I need a Netscaler? And we'll cover that later. But if they do, what is it? What's the edition? What's the version? Because there's very specific versioning requirements with XenMobile. What are the targets you want to manage? Are we doing all iOS? That's mostly I'm seeing in the field. Somebody else, may have a little bit different mix. Is it iOS and Android? Is it iOS, Android, and Winmo, BlackBerry, stuff like that? Any customer third-party app wrapping desired? And running some quirky stuff with app wrapping. Are we going to be integrating with existing Citrix on site, XenApp or XenDesktop? That's going to bring storefront into play, and then you could possibly run into troubleshooting a whole Citrix environment trying to get it work, so keep that top of mind. Citrix actually has a pretty good checklist, a prereq checklist out on eDocs. I'll be honest, it's not the one I use, but it looks pretty close. I haven't done a side-by-side with the one I use yet, but I would encourage you to basically copy, paste that, dump it into a Word doc, and give it to your clients and run through it because it covers probably at least 3 pages worth of information that your clients will want to have together for you, from the DNS requirements, all the VIPs, the Netscaler information, the gateway information, the FQDNs, the DNS, all that kind of stuff. It runs down so many data points that really need to be hashed out before you get on site for a XenMobile deployment. You need to be handing that out up front for any engagement you do, and following up and making sure your clients do it before you get there, because I've been the ones that have and have not, and the ones that have, it's a whole lot smoother deployment. Office 365, that's a question you got to find out. Do they have O365 or not? And we'll cover a little bit of the why on that later. And then I briefly touched on versioning. There are very specific versioning requirements across the XenMobile stack, extending into Netscaler and storefront, so that's a short little bit.ly link. And you don't have to write these links down. I've got a master link at the end of the presentation. You can download the stack. But they'll give you your version requirements, so you make sure everything lines out. Netscalers need enhanced versions, stuff like that. I wanted to show you briefly how simple the architecture is with XenMobile. It goes. Yeah, so here's our simplified XenMobile architecture. It's kind of it's a big funny mess. Actually, you can see it better than I thought you could. But out here, this is external. There's your MDM servers. Of course, this is a Halt Netscaler right here. Storefront, ShareFile storage controllers, AppCs, all the internal services we're going to want to touch. Exchange, LDAP, DNS, NTP servers. CIF shares for storage zones. Plus all the different protocols, ports, inbound, outbound, where everything's going. This is, actually I'm not sure where I got this. I got this from a partner doc, but you can steal it from my deck. That's still a good architecture diagram. So yeah, it's kind of complicated if you didn't get that already. It's still being simplified as we speak. One note, and this is kind of a common thing I've seen, a little kind of side tip is a lot of clients, when we're talking about the firewall requirements, the firewall requirements to the external facing are actually not too bad. It's 80443 and 8443 for iOS. But we also have a requirement down here, if you can see it, for 2195 and 2196 for AP&S for iOS. the Apple push notification service. That's actually only an outbound requirement, and I walk into a lot of places, they have that open bidirectional. You don't need that. Outbound only, not in. Everything else is cool though. So probably the first question I get from a lot of clients is, do I need a Netscaler? And of course, these are ones that maybe have Netscalers, maybe they don't have Netscalers. They may be small businesses. It just varies, and really, it's a great question because when you're talking XenMobile with your clients and you're talking about the cost, the licensing, and all that kind of stuff, you get all that kind of understood, and then, oh, hey, we need to throw a Netscaler on top of that, or do we? Because it automatically bumps your price point, $5, $10, $20, $30,000 depending on your deployment size. So, typical fashion, consultant answer, it kind of depends. Okay, and it is a typical consultant answer. So I'm going to give you kind of the non-Citrix line on this. There'll be some asterisks on it, and I'm actually going to be writing a blog article on this to start directing clients to when I get asked this question. MDM, no. MDM's right now sits in the DMZ, and it's designed to sit out there. Leave it there. I'll tell you more on that later. If you're going to do HA though, yeah, you kind of need a Netscaler, at least standard edition, to do load balancing of the two MDM servers.
You use F5 too.
Yeah, or F5. Jarian's actually been doing or done an F5 deployment. So yeah, just any load balancer for that. It's just simple, 8443 load balancing, nothing special, no gateway services. On the app controller, not necessarily. You can place it in the DMZ, but I would never recommend doing it this way. Proceed at your own risk, because honestly, if you probably did that and you called Citrix support, they're probably going to laugh and then probably not help you. It can be done though. I've verified it can be done. You can put them out in the DMZ, it'll work, but I wouldn't recommend it. I would always put them behind a gateway, and then if you need HA, you're going to want to do a standard edition, so you have gateway services and load balancing available to you. And then for Enterprise Edition, pretty much more of the same. Netscaler gateway minimum, standard if HA is desired across the stack. So that's kind of where you get. One last note on that, this will lead into the next slide. If you're doing active sync gating, if you're utilizing Netscaler Connector, which I'm going to talk about, the preferences actually go with Enterprise Edition with the app cache option because of basically the device list that MDM maintains and ships over to XNC. The app cache option is going to help speed that up a little bit for the active sync gating, which leads us right into this. So what is Netscaler Connector, XNC, and XMM? Let me take a drink before I pass out. And I'm writing a blog on this too because nobody has a good answer. So Netscaler Connector and Netscaler Mail Manager, you need them if you're basically doing, if you have native active sync on the outside for your clients. So they're using native mail clients, iOS native mail, Android, stuff like that. The Netscaler Connector is just like it sounds. It installs on a Windows box. It talks to your Netscaler. It does require, of course, your active sync traffic to be currently being proxied through the Netscaler, which hopefully if they have Netscalers, they're running active sync through it. It can be designed for HA, Netscaler Connector can. I don't know how to do it, and I've never met anybody that does. And there is only a single very vague blurb in eDocs about it being able to be made highly available with some XML stuff, and I think maybe a file share somewhere. I've got emails into my contacts in the XenMobile group trying to find someone that knows how to do it. Honestly, it's not a big deal though, because most of the times when you're deploying XenMobile, especially the Enterprise Edition, you're going to be going with the Work Suite anyway, so you're going to be doing any active sync gating. They're going to be using WorksMail, you're going to cut off the native mail clients, and they're going to be using the goodness that is WorksMail. XenMobile Mail Manager works a little bit differently, so it actually works a little bit further back into the enterprise. It contacts Exchange directly. It's kind of out of band, and all its commands are PowerShell based, because that's the only way for it to talk. It's also required if you have O365, which goes back kind of the tips is, do they have Office 365 or not? So it will reach out and do the management via PowerShell if they're O365, and you have to do that. Also needed if you have BlackBerries in the enterprise. Bigger question there would probably be, why do you still have BlackBerries in the enterprise? And then there is no known high availability option for that, unfortunately. None that I've ever found or been able to get anybody to admit to. So high-level XNC and XMM, don't really worry too much about those. Like I said, you're generally going to be dealing with the work suite anyway and worksmail, so those don't make as big of a deal. So let's dive into MDM and spend some time going over some best practices and gotchas on that and sharing some real-world tips. First one, a big one, so it goes on a Windows box. MDM's the Windows-based one. No IIS. It's Tomcat-based. So if you have a template or something, make sure IIS isn't on there because that's very bad. It won't work. And then during configuration, three of the most common policies that we usually do for clients, we see in the field and generally makes 80% of the people very happy is they want terms and conditions pushed down to the managed devices. So somebody has to read that, hey, we can wipe everything on this device and you can't sue us. Click OK. Putting a passcode on the device, forcing that, and blocking rooted and jailbroken devices if they fall out of compliance because they get rooted or jailbroken. Another tip is in the MDM management console, it ships with a whole lot of default junk in there, and delete it all out. You have Android policies, WinMo policies, test app policies and all that crap. Delete everything you're not going to use. It simplifies it for your customer. You don't actually get confused and end up pushing out the wrong policy or application or anything like that. There's way too much clutter in there. So always go through and delete all the junk you're not going to use. In the installation wizard, you will have an option to do PostgreSQL or regular SQL. Postgres is only suitable for POCs and never go production with it. Always use SQL. So if you're doing production, if you think they're actually serious and this could turn into a production, just go SQL from the beginning. I try to just stay away from Postgres period so you don't have to redo all your work. Oh, do they?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, SQL Express, if you're doing POC, then that even makes even better sense. Don't do the Postgres. So, XenMobile is still a little bit hard to handle, and the HA even more so. We'll touch on that in just a second. Always install a single server first. That's probably my biggest advice to anybody that's going to do XenMobile deployment. Start out with one. Don't go in and try to get HA stood up off the ground to begin with. Start with one server, get it up, get it fully functional, test your enrollments, and let it ride. And make sure none of the bugs are present because weird stuff will happen. Then build on that. If you try to go HA out of the gate, you're asking for trouble. In the installation wizard, when it's setting up its internal PKI store, self-signed stuff, just use that. Go forward with the internal self-signed search that MDM sets up during the install. You can replace those afterwards, but it's about making sure the server's up, fully functional, and there's nothing crazy going on with it because it's still a fluid product. Yeah, Anton.
Using Netscaler,
Yes, and and actually that's a good point, and I'm going to tell you why probably about one slide from now. Nope, you're good. Nope, you're good. Because I have a very interesting story about that. And then so about the whole thing about don't trust the CTX articles, this would be why. So this actually is a CTX article about replacing, about using an external cert on it. You want to load a DigiCert on it, for instance. For one, you have to edit some files, the servers XML and PKI XML. But within this file there where it says publicly trusted equals true, that's actually wrong. That should be false. And this is a current CTX article. If you say true, it's not a huge deal, but when you're rolling iOS devices, and I don't know if any of you have seen the enrollments, you get some cert pop-ups and accept and all this kind of stuff to install the certificates on it. It'll show that the cert's not verified. Even though you're using a publicly trusted cert, your chain's good, you get your intermediate, your roots, everything looks good on it, it's going to say it's not verified. You can still install it, don't get me wrong, but it could just cost you a few more help desk calls. Why is there a red X right here and it says not verified instead of verified? If you change that to false, when you edit this bean, that'll work and it'll actually say verified. So cool little tip there, and I haven't really found that anywhere else. So another thing is servers XML and PKI XML. So when you're setting up HA, you have to edit these two files to do Tomcat clustering. No, I'm sorry, wake up, back up. No, this is when you do the certificate stuff. This is for the certificates. And what's crazy about this, and I actually didn't even put it in the slide because I'm making this deck publicly available, is the passwords are in clear text. So when you're working with your clients, be prepared for that, and don't let them use their normal password. I wouldn't necessarily point it out to them, but whatever the private key is for that SSL cert, it's clear text right in those files. And it's clear as day, and it's kind of embarrassing. Hopefully that'll be fixed. SSL Bridge versus SSL offload. So it was a big deal with 8.7 and I think a patch on 8.6 that we could finally do SSL offload. Hey, you can do SSL offload. You don't have to bridge through the Netscaler to the MDM servers. You can do offload. You can move them internal to your LAN if you want to, stuff like that. Don't. And the reason is that auth is still broken. Auth still takes place on the MDM servers. So even if you do SSL offload, if you move them internal, what you're essentially doing is allowing unauthenticated traffic, at least for authentication, to traverse all the way inside the LAN before it hits your MDM and you authenticate. So my advice right now, and in fairness, the reference architecture still all say this, even though there may be some conflicting Citrix blogs about it, leave them in the DMZ. Don't move them inside until that's fixed, until authn is implemented. I've heard it's coming, so I expect we'll see it this year. I don't know what 9.0 looks like yet. I kind of doubt it'll be in there, but until that's fixed, leave them in the DMZ, because you don't want unauthenticated traffic traversing to your internal. Another piece of advice, use a service account login when you're getting your APNS, your Apple Push Notification certificate. Because we've seen people, and you can even read about it online, this is a pretty common piece of advice, it's tied to a login. So if you go use, Joe Blow on the help desk login to get your APNS, and that's his Apple ID, and he leaves, you're kind of screwed. And then if you have to replace your APNS cert, guess what? Everybody's re-enrolling. Large deployments, then everybody's immediately really ticked off at you. So do it under, make a generic login and the generic Apple ID, use that to provision your APNS cert. And then finally, log files are your friend. App controller log files, you pull them off through the GUI. MDM, they're actually Tomcat log files. I didn't bother putting the path up there. It's real easy for you guys to Google it and find it. But when stuff starts going quirky with XenMobile, and it inevitably will, first place to start digging through the log files. And if that doesn't work, maybe start checking and unchecking checkboxes. HA on MDM is a pain in the HA. So right now, high availability with MDM, it's Tomcat, and you got to go in and manually edit a stack of files, and it's a pain in the butt. And this is one reason why my advice is you start with a single server, because if you go in and start trying to cluster this and you do a wrong space somewhere, a wrong character, you just broke everything. You never even knew if it was working to begin with. So get your single server stood up, back up all the files you have to edit, and I've got links here to eDocs, which isn't so clear. And then I think that may be Robin Hobo's blog there. I forget which one that is. There is a working blog in the community about how to do that. It walks you through it with screenshots and a little bit more user-friendly. So follow that one. If you did it right, you got your single server up and working, back up your files before you edit them, and cross your fingers and you'll be okay. App controller. I've had this question sometimes. Bigger clients, it's really not a big deal, but hey, do we really need the $300 Apple Developer Enterprise Agreement? Can we get by with the $100 one and stuff like that? It depends. Typical consultant answer. Okay, you can do the $100 one, but here's the cons of it: is you're limited to 100 devices, and you have to specify the UUIDs. So that's really only makes sense for either very, very small deployments or maybe pilot. But I still say just go ahead and spend the extra $200 and get the enterprise one. Because that's unlimited. You don't have to mess with UUIDs. It just gives you the blanket one.
I just did a project where they tried to use the cheap route after the first 15.
It's a pain.
Bought the regular one.
Yeah, those UUIDs are like,
Yeah.
80 characters long.
I told them, but they wanted to keep it themselves. So.
Yep.
I think the.
I don't know.
I don't know. They just went and bought the 1091.
I don't think so. Honestly, I don't know. I'm not sure about that. Another piece of advice, keep your MDX toolkit up to date. When you're wrapping apps and doing your custom apps and stuff like that. I've seen it before that we couldn't get an app to wrap, and we'd look and we'd be like, oh crap, we're a dot version behind on the MDX toolkit. Get the newest one, boom, it wraps, no problem, and it runs. So that's kind of when you're wrapping apps for App Controller. First thing to check is make sure you've got the most up-to-the-date MDX toolkit you can get. Also decide if you're going to require MDM enrollment or if you're going to allow standalone MAM. So you actually have the option to not let people come straight into App Controller. There's a checkbox that you force MDM enrollment. They have to enroll their device for MDM management before you allow them access to the MAM stuff, to the data, to the apps, to the custom stuff. So that's kind of a decision point there. And yes, you do need a map to wrap everything. You will be assimilated. So yeah, anything you're going to wrap, it has to have a Mac.
Also remember too, when you update your toolkit, upgrade your apps as well.
Yeah, rewrap them, exactly. Yep, and yeah, that can be a pain if you have a lot, but that is the best advice. Another little kind of not known piece of information on AppC is recommendation right now is to kind of disable beaconing. AppC has beaconing much like Storefront does, where it can figure out kind of where it's at. Hey, am I inside or outside? The recommendation, what I'm hearing and what I've actually gone and done is to disable beaconing. Don't use it. Force everybody out through the Netscaler gateway. Hairpin them out. Bring them back in through the gateway. And the argument being that you don't want, well, one, you lose micro VPN functionality if they're inside and they go straight to the App Controller VIP, because the App Controller floats a VIP independent of Netscaler. You don't want you don't want to lose your micro VPN, and you don't want, frankly, you don't want user devices floating around internally and hitting AppC directly. Force them through the gateway. The argument is it's more secure. I think it's arguable, but I'll always lean that way if there's any hint of it. So it's pretty easy to do. And of course, watch for split brain DNS in these situations. None of the reference architecture takes into account split brain DNS. So if your client runs it, which most everybody does, you got to duplicate all your DNS entries. Make sure you've got all the stuff on the internal and the external DNS so people end up at the right spots. Like I said, the reference architectures don't bring that to light, so they can kind of throw a wrench in your deployment if you're not thinking about it. Know your high availability methods. With App Controller, it's active-passive or clustered with active-active with a cluster head and some worker nodes behind it. Or you can put them both together and do both. Luckily, though, that's really not required. It's really large deployments. I think Citrix sizing says over 8,000 devices. So generally, you're just going to do the active-active or an active-passive. Keep it simple. That would be my advice. And that's a CTX blog article that kind of talks about that. And just for note, MDM is active-active when you do it in HA. So they both run at the same time. Another tip with App Controller is know your HA patching. Your config is replicated, so if you never worked with App Controller before, it's just like a Linux-based appliance. You import it, it's an OVF. If you're on vSphere, you import it. Know your HA patching. Your config is replicated. Patches are not, which kind of makes sense. So the recommended thing is patch the primary, shut it down, second's going to come up and grab it, patch it, and you're all good again. Just be aware of that. And then something I ran into on a deployment is the AppC IPs, and then the VIP that fronts them. It's its own VIP, not a Netscaler VIP. All need to be on the same subnet. We had an instance where we had the VIP on a different one, and it did not work. So moved to the same subnet, boom, everything started talking. So that's pretty much on AppC. Share file. the ShareFile just works. I mean, you know, this is a good thing. That first link is to Dan Brinkman's blog, common issues when deploying ShareFile, and obviously he covers it. So if you run anything with a ShareFile, it's generally an installation issue. You did wrong install order, or there's a few other things that he points out. Great advice. That's the blog right there. If you can't get ShareFile storage zone controllers deployed, or if you're running some kind of errors, hit his blog up. And then SAML is possible in SSO against App Controller. App Controller can be your SAML provider. I'm working on a blog post. We finally got it working and figured out. Actually, a friend of mine at CCS did the brunt of the work. And I've got screenshots, I got to put it all together. But it's a heck of a lot easier than doing ADFS in SAML, which is like 50 pages long with Andy's walkthrough. This way is a lot easier. And I hope to have that out soon, depending on scheduling. Enterprise Edition, just as a whole, I've got HA concerns, specifically to multi-site. So the issue you're going to have, and I challenge anybody, is I don't think XenMobile can be deployed multi-site. You can't do DR with XenMobile, is basically my point. And the reason being that the HA traffic between the app controllers and the MDMs is multicast. And I have yet to find anybody that has successfully deployed XenMobile DR multi-site because of that. Have you done it? Did you turn on multicast for everything?
You shouldn't use J for multi-site deployment. The J is on one side. You want to start the environment with the secondary side. The tracing scenario when you pick up or you replicate database for your MDM servers and cap for your MDM servers. Secondary location. Controller, easiest way is to VM.
Snap it and bring it over. That's
Easiest way, but there's other ways. So it's possible.
so you're replicating the SQL database, and what about like the XenMobile install directory, where a lot of that stuff lives, a lot of the config and stuff like that?
So basically, when you change the configuration, after you finish the setup, config files any policy goes to database.
Okay.
Config files are changed only if you modify server settings to update the certificate.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk to you after. You, sir, are a unicorn. Okay? Because you wouldn't believe how many CCS engineers I've talked to that said it can't be done, and they don't know anybody that can do it.
There's no supporting that.
Yeah, and that's something we talked about. They did have a session at Synergy.
Albert Alvarez did it. I missed it.
For GSLD.
Yeah, and I wanted to see how he did it.
Like it was backup stuff like he was talking about.
Yeah. And that's fine. So he's done it, but still be aware it multicast. So don't go stretching it between two data centers unless your client's going to turn on multicast, which I don't think any of them will. I want to talk to you afterwards. No SAN or UC certs. Wildcards will make your life easier. I don't want to have an argument about security stuff with them. It'll just make your life easier. I try to always use wildcards. Did you cert for the win? Okay. Because you get have up to 4 certs. You got to have an MDM cert, an app controller cert, a ShareFile cert, windmill enrollment cert. It's just easier if you just go to wildcard. If you want to do separate ones, you can, but that's on you. Make sure you do proper DNS namespace planning. Like I said, you're going to have all these different inbound ways you can come through. Make sure you plan out the namespaces and how you're going to bring everybody in. The most public one's going to be the MDM for enrollment, generally. You don't have MAM just sitting out there exposed and people go into it. Backups, so kind of similar. Backups on MDM, install directory, SQL database, app controller, snap it, get it off somehow. Just the whole VM is best. For enrollment, I recommend, and actually sat in a couple sessions and heard the same thing, so I'm glad I'm validated. Certificate-based enrollment with PIN, so that you're not continually having your end users type in their AD credentials every time. So I think this is probably the most prevalent deployment method. I know it's The one CCS does a lot. I'm a big fan of it because I don't want people having to always enter their AD credentials in on their phone. Just punch in a pin and be done. Great walkthrough there on how to do it. If you don't trust the Netscaler wizards, which some of us do, some of us don't, I've actually on the latest e-build, I've trusted the Netscaler wizards and they haven't let me down. That's all the session outlines for how to configure the Netscaler because it's a little bit of a pain to do that. That's why I try to rely on the wizards first, but if the wizards fail, then that's the way to do it.
On the latest build, the one thing I found was that there's some issue with Android.
Secure browse.
Secure
Yep. I remember us talking about that. All your works apps need to be wrapped. That hopefully is a given. Take micro VPN, they call it micro VPN, it's still a full SSL VPN tunnel. Take that into account when you're sizing your Netscalers. So depending on what you read and what you see out there, 3 to 5 times increase in traffic over normal ICA traffic, ICA proxy traffic. That's what I heard. So did you have a question?
Micro VPN is CTP, I want to give you the full, it's ACA proxy.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not, yeah.
That goes directly against everything I've seen.
For some reason, the name of this issue is
Mm-hmm.
there's a reason when you configure upload Netscaler, you point it to use app controller as well as use SD is ISP proxy. It's the same technology.
Okay.
My understanding is you were up and running and that you had an open, secure connection through the Netscaler at all times. When I worked at Citrix, these full terminals was that there was a full-blown VPN.
Yeah, that was my understanding.
It's a full-blown VPN. Some of the challenge had to do with bandwidth and lack of bandwidth.
So if you look at the Netscaler data sheet, there's numbers for sizing. There's VPN sessions and there's IPA proxy sessions.
Yeah.
What I have been given for guidance in terms of sizing for mobile is factor 2x for IPA proxy. So if your Netscaler 5550
Exactly.
5,000 IPA proxy sessions, you would say 2,500 for mobile sessions.
Exactly. That's, I'm in that range, 3 to 5 times. You said 2 times. That's what I've heard.
But
Okay.
the full VPN session is more than even that.
Yeah, because it's more load. Okay. I'm recommending dedicated Netscaler for Enterprise Edition. It's not always going to happen, but if you're lucky and you walk into a pristine environment or they've got money to blow, obviously if you're really lucky, they have SDXs. So you just stand up your virtual Netscalers. Barring that, VPXs depending on sizing. The reason is the enhanced editions are what's required. So you're seeing a lot of fluidity in the enhanced editions and new XenMobile features coming pretty fast and furious. New enhanced build just came out, I think, within the last month, maybe a month or two. So it's a lot in lockdown environments. It's a lot easier if you have your dedicated XenMobile ones. Plus for loading issues with the micro VPN and stuff like that. It's not going to always happen. Go ahead. Yes, correct. Yeah.
But that I don't know how that
Yeah.
that would be a great
There's
area.
art and science, just reference.
Yeah.
You're never going to have all of your users having 5 apps. So I get
There,
that.
there was a guy at Synergy, I don't remember his name, he was a Citrix employee, and he ran a great session on on basically load testing Netscaler, and basically load testing XenMobile period, and they were using a Netscaler. He was utilizing Cerebro, which is an internal tool they use for load testing. I don't remember his name though, but he talked a lot about the capacity and stuff like that. All right, that's it, guys. I actually live. So you can download this deck. I know, right? You can download this deck from that bit.ly link. So if you want to take a picture, this is the slide to take a picture of. The entire deck's in there. Follow me on Twitter, hit my blog, email me, and don't forget to tweet either Adam Session Rocks or Adam Session Sucks.
Are you going to post that building link on your blog?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I can. Oh, sorry. Let me go back. There you go. Apologize for my PowerPoint skills. I am not as well polished as a lot of the gentlemen in this room. Thank you.